You see, there is something rather extraordinary that happens to a person around the age of 40. Not to everyone, mind you, but to those who have been paying attention, to those who have not been entirely asleep through the first half of their lives. And what happens is this: they wake up, not with a jolt, not with some dramatic revelation necessarily, but with a quiet recognition that everything they thought was important, well, it simply is not. Now, this is curious, because we have been told our entire lives that youth is the golden time, that the 20s and 30s are when life really happens, when we are supposed to be climbing ladders and making names for ourselves and proving to the world that we matter. And so we spend those decades running. Running after what exactly? Running after an idea of success that somebody else handed to us, an idea of happiness that came from some magazine or some television program, an idea of who we should be that has nothing whatsoever to do with who we actually are. I remember being 25 and thinking I had it all figured out. I knew exactly where I was going and exactly how to get there. So I was so certain, so absolutely convinced that if I just worked hard enough, if I just achieved enough, if I just accumulated enough, then I would finally be happy. And you know what happened? I worked hard, I achieved, I accumulated. And when I got there, when I reached that place I thought was the destination, I looked around and said, is that all? Because you see, the first 40 years of life, they are really a kind of preparation. Not a preparation in the way we usually think of it, as in preparing for something better later. No, it is more like the way a caterpillar prepares to become a butterfly. The caterpillar does not know it is preparing. It is simply living, eating leaves, crawling around, doing what caterpillars do. But all the while, something is building inside it. Something is getting ready. This is what your 20s and 30s are. You are the caterpillar. You think you are just living your life, making your mistakes, having your heartbreaks, building your career, trying to figure out who you are supposed to be. But really, you are gathering material. You are collecting experiences. You are learning lessons that you will not understand until much, much later. When you are young, life feels urgent. Everything matters so desperately much. That job you did not get, that person who rejected you, that mistake you made at the party last weekend. It all feels like the end of the world. Because when you are young, you believe that every moment is defining you, that every choice is permanent, that every failure is a judgment on your worth as a human being. But here is what nobody tells you. All of that urgency, all of that desperation, it is just noise. It is the sound of your ego trying very hard to construct itself, trying to build an identity out of achievements and possessions and other people's opinions. And the ego must be built, you see. This is part of the process. You cannot skip this step. You must first believe you are somebody before you can discover that you are nobody, or rather that you are everybody, that you are the whole thing. Around 40, something shifts. And what shifts is this. You begin to see through the game. Not all at once, perhaps. Maybe it starts with small things. You stop caring quite so much about what your neighbors think. You find yourself less interested in impressing people. You notice that the things you once thought were so important, the title on your business card, the car in your driveway, the number in your bank account, they start to feel rather hollow. And this is when the fear comes. Because if you are not your achievements, if you are not your possessions, if you are not your role in society, then who are you? This is the question that terrifies people. This is why so many people around this age buy sports cars, or have affairs, or make dramatic changes they later regret. They are running from the question. They are trying very hard not to see what is becoming obvious. But if you do not run, if you sit still and let the question be there, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice that beneath all the roles you have been playing, beneath all the masks you have been wearing, there is something else. Something that was there all along. Something that never changed even though everything in your life changed. The Buddhists call this your true nature. The Hindus call it Atman. I simply call it you, the real you. Not the you that your parents wanted you to be. Not the you that society expected you to become. Not the you that you have been trying so hard to prove is worthy and good and successful. But the you that exists underneath all of that, the you that watches thoughts arise and pass away, the you that remains constant while everything else flows and changes. And here is why life begins at 40. Because this is when you finally have enough experience to see the pattern. You have lived long enough to watch your certainties crumble. You have been disappointed enough times to stop believing in fairy tales. You have lost enough to understand that everything is temporary. You have hurt enough to develop compassion. You have failed enough to let go of perfectionism. Think about it. In your 20s, every mistake feels catastrophic because you have not yet learned that you will survive it. In your 30s, you are still trying to prove yourself, still trying to convince the world that you matter. But by 40, you have made so many mistakes and survived them all that you begin to realize mistakes are not catastrophes. They are just mistakes. You have tried so hard to prove yourself and discovered that no amount of proof is ever enough. The people who love you regardless. The people who do not love you will not be convinced by your achievements. This is liberation. Not the kind of liberation that comes from escaping your life, but the kind that comes from finally accepting it. From finally accepting yourself. Every wrinkle, every failure, every foolish thing you have ever done. All of it. Because you see, those first 40 years, you were building something. You thought you were building a career or a family or a reputation. But really, you were building material. Raw material that you will now use to become who you actually are. I knew a man once who spent his entire youth climbing the ladder at a bank. He worked 70-hour weeks. He missed his children's birthdays. He sacrificed his health, his marriage, his peace of mind, all for the next promotion. And then at 42, he had a heart attack. Not a fatal one, but close enough. And as he lay in that hospital bed, he had a realization. He realized that he had spent the first half of his life working for something he did not even want. He had been chasing an idea of success that meant nothing to him, an idea someone else had planted in his mind when he was too young to question it. When he recovered, he quit his job. His friends thought he was mad. His family worried he was having a breakdown, but he was not having a breakdown. He was having a breakthrough. He started teaching music to children, which is what he had always wanted to do, but thought was not practical. And for the first time in his adult life, he was happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from external circumstances, but the kind that comes from living in alignment with who you actually are. This is what happens at 40. When you are awake. You stop living for some imaginary future where everything will finally be perfect. You stop believing that happiness is something you achieve. You start understanding that happiness is something you allow. It is what happens naturally when you stop interfering with yourself, when you stop trying to be someone you are not. Now, I must tell you something important. This awakening, this shift that happens around 40, it is not automatic. Many people reach 40, 50, 60, 70 and never wake up at all. They keep running the same patterns, chasing the same empty goals, wondering why they feel so hollow inside. This is because awakening requires something of you. It requires that you stop, that you pause long enough to actually look at your life instead of just living it on autopilot. And it requires that you face something very uncomfortable, your own mortality. You see, when you are young, death is abstract. It is something that happens to other people, to old people, far in the future. But around 40, death becomes real. Your body starts to change. Things that used to work easily now require effort. You start losing people, your parents perhaps, friends, colleagues, people your own age. And you realize with a clarity that is almost painful that this is going to happen to you too. That one day, probably sooner than you would like, you are going to close your eyes and never open them again. Now, for most people, this realization is terrifying. And so they spend the rest of their lives running from it, distracting themselves, pretending it is not true. But for the person who is awakening, this realization is not a curse. It is a gift. because it forces you to ask the only question that matters. How do you want to spend the time you have left? And suddenly, all those things that seem so important, they do not seem important anymore. The argument with your neighbor about the fence, the slight you felt when someone did not invite you to their party, the worry about whether people think you are successful enough, all of it falls away. Because when you truly understand that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on nonsense. This is why life begins at 40. Not because anything magical happens to your body or your circumstances, but because this is when you finally have enough experience and enough awareness to wake up from the dream you have been living. To see that the roles you have been playing are just roles, that the identity you have been defending is just a story, that beneath it all you are something much simpler and much more vast than you ever imagined. You are like a wave on the ocean that suddenly realizes it is not separate from the water. You have been spending all this energy trying to be an impressive wave, a big wave, a wave that matters. And then you realize you are not a wave at all. You are the ocean itself, temporarily taking the form of a wave. And when this wave crashes on the shore and disappears, nothing is lost. Because you were never just the wave, you were always the whole ocean. This understanding changes everything. When you know you are the ocean, you stop being afraid of crashing on the shore. You stop worrying about whether you are a good enough wave. You stop comparing yourself to other waves. You simply ride the current, express yourself fully for as long as you are here, and then return to the vastness from which you came. And here is what is beautiful. Once you stop trying so hard to be somebody, you become more fully alive than you have ever been. Because all that energy you were spending on maintaining your image, on defending your ego, on proving your worth, that energy is suddenly available for actually living, for loving, for creating, for experiencing the extraordinary gift of being conscious in this strange and wonderful universe. I have seen this happen over and over again. People reach their 40s, they have their crisis or their awakening, whatever you want to call it, and then something opens up. They finally pursue that creative project they have been putting off. They finally leave that relationship that has been draining them for years. They finally speak up about what they really think instead of always trying to please everyone. They finally slow down enough to actually taste their food, to actually hear the birds singing, to actually see the sky. This is not about becoming reckless or irresponsible. It is about becoming real. It is about trading the prison of others' expectations for the freedom of your own authentic being. And yes, this might mean disappointing people. It might mean making changes that others do not understand. But here is what you discover. The people who love you for who you really are, they are relieved. They have been waiting for you to stop performing. The people who are disappointed that you are no longer performing for them, well, they were never really seeing you anyway. They were seeing their idea of who they needed you to be. Let me tell you about the art of living that becomes possible after 40. When you are young, you are always reaching for something. More money, more status, more love, more approval. Your hands are clenched into fists, trying to grasp and hold and control. But after 40, if you have been paying attention, your hands begin to open. Not because you have given up, but because you have learned something about the nature of life. Life is like water. The tighter you grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you cup your hands gently, when you hold lightly, the water stays. This is the great paradox. You get what you want by wanting it less desperately. You find happiness by stopping the frantic search for it. You become somebody by finally accepting that you are nobody in particular. And with this letting go comes a peace that the young cannot know, because the young are still in the throes of becoming. They are still under the spell of the future, still believing that everything important is going to happen later, after they achieve this or acquire that. But after 40, you begin to understand that there is no later. There is only now. This moment right here is all you have ever had and all you will ever have. And it is enough. My God, it is more than enough. It is everything. This is when you finally understand what the mystics have been saying all along, that heaven is not some place you go after you die if you have been good enough. Heaven is here now, when you stop resisting what is and start accepting it. When you stop trying to control everything and start trusting the process. When you stop defending your small separate self and start experiencing your vast interconnected nature. But you cannot learn this at 20. You have to live it. You have to try controlling everything and watch it all fall apart anything. You have to chase success and discover it is empty. You have to build your identity and then watch it crumble. This is not failure, this is the curriculum. This is exactly what is supposed to happen. So if you are approaching 40 or you have passed it, and you are feeling this strange sense of things falling apart, of not knowing who you are anymore, of questioning everything you thought was true, I want you to know something. This is not a crisis. This is a chrysalis. You are not falling apart. You are falling together. The caterpillar is dissolving so the butterfly can emerge, and the butterfly is not better than the caterpillar. It is just the next stage. It is what the caterpillar was always meant to become. Your 20s and 30s were not wasted. They were necessary. You had to believe you were somebody before you could discover you are nobody and everybody all at once. You had to take yourself seriously before you could learn to take yourself lightly. You had to play the game before you could see it is just a game. And now at 40 or beyond, you have a choice. You can fight this awakening. You can cling to your old identity, your old certainties, your old ways of being, even though they no longer fit. Many people do this. They spend the second half of their lives trying desperately to keep being who they were in the first half, and it is exhausting and ultimately futile. Or you can surrender to it. You can let the old you die so the real you can finally be born. You can stop performing and start being. You can stop defending and start accepting. You can stop becoming and start simply existing in the glory of what you already are. This is why life begins at 40. Not because the first 40 years did not count, but because they were the preparation for this moment. The moment when you finally understand that you do not need to earn your place in the universe. You are the universe. You do not need to prove your worth. Your worth is intrinsic, obvious, undeniable. You do not need to become somebody. You already are somebody. In fact, you are everybody. You are the whole damn